Hey everybody, Neon here, another analysis video. This is one that is coming once again from the WePlay Tournament. I'm probably just going to keep on using some of their material because the games are so good. This is one that came from today. It was Lumi v Melo, and just a really sweet, intricate, deep game that they played. So I'm really excited to be able to go through with this. This entire series was absolutely spectacular. It was a joy to watch Lumi's deck specifically. I really liked this. I was choosing between this one and the second game, but we're gonna go with the third game because I think there are a few elements of it that are a little bit easier to pick out. And really, what I want to focus on as we're going through this is talking about the objectives that we're playing for and why. And the reason why is because watching decks like this, it can feel a little bit scattered, because people are kind of like just doing things in different lanes. And especially there's a lot of like back and forth of jumping from lane to lane because you're blinking around, people are dying a lot, and as a result you want to think through this systematically to understand, okay, why were these players playing in the way that they were? Why did they pull the trigger of these various things? Or why did they expect their opponents to do these various plays all the time? And in order to actually see how the game was played out. I think this game was played really, really well as well by both players. So I'm excited to get into it, so let's get started. So yes, once again, I'd like to mention that this is from the WePlay Tournament. There'll be a link in the description for the VODs for that. They're just like absolutely spectacular. Go through and watch them. There's a lot to learn if you want to be a better Artifact player. This is one of the places to be, and also just you want to be entertained because this is just high quality competitive Artifact that is happening, and I'm just excited to see it all right now. We're going to start things off nice and slow, though, with an Ignite on the side of Lumi. So it is LuminousInverse versus Melo. LuminousInverse is most famous for his Dota work as a caster, but he actually has a lot of experience in card games as well, has a history in doing those, just not as competitively. So, but Melo, I think, is more known for some of his Hearthstone work, I believe. I'm not sure, honestly. But definitely coming from a card gaming background. So the matchup, by the way, is the blue-green combo deck versus the mono-blue control deck. And just talking a little bit about the win conditions of these two decks. The blue-green deck oftentimes wins the game by basically being able to play infinite spells. They just draw a bunch of their deck, and then they play out the Prey on the Weak, and then followed by the Emissary of the Quorum, and that often can set up a kill that way on even an Ancient over the course of 2 turns. Gust is a big part of their game plan as well, as it is really important for being able to set up a big turn like that. And another component of it that's important is the Aghanim Sanctum, because you can actually set up the Gust, Stars Align, Aghanim Sanctum, and then go off. It should be noted that his version of the deck has some interesting components to it. So for instance, right here, we saw Lumi play out the Dimensional Portal, and I think that this is a card that looked really good here, because like for instance, you're playing it out here as well, and you're getting some very real beatdown on. Now, this is important because for a few reasons. One, this is a bit of a combo piece as well. This is, I think, a minor role for the card. So it plays a bit of a role in the combo to be able to actually set up more damage, and it's useful for that. In this instance, it's taking a second role, which is that it is kind of providing a creature-based fair game plan, and this combo deck actually does have a reasonable fair game as well, because you play that out, you play Hounds of War, maybe you ramp out a Emissary of the Quorum. You don't need to go off necessarily with the Emissary, with the Incarnation of Salamene, in order to get a lot of damage in on a tower. And that, especially in a matchup like this, is really good because it forces your opponent to respond to that. And for instance, using sweepers against a board full of creeps as opposed to a board full of your heroes, for example. So this is a really powerful aspect to the card dimensional world. And the final role that it plays is just kind of a meat shield. You can play it against the black-red decks or the any red deck and just soak up a ton of damage. And that is always something that you are looking to get in those matchups. So we have a conflagration that has been deployed into the center lane. This is a very powerful card in this matchup against that fair-ish game plan that I'm talking about. This is one of the reasons that I think you really want to play the card, honestly, in a deck like this, is to be able to specifically fight against blue go-wide decks, whether it's this deck or a fairer version that isn't playing the incarnation of Salamene. So get a decent amount of damage in on that tower. And also something that I think that this is a deck too, like the combo deck, that can kind of like soft go off. Like you don't have to fully win the game in that turn, or like do tons and tons of damage. But having a burst of damage that's like 20 damage is a lot easier than a burst of damage that's like 40 or 50. So being able to wear down a tower is a pretty big advantage. So for instance, right here we're not like going off. We're actually gonna be able to take this tower on Lumi's side, and there's nothing that we can do from the side of Melo. I mean, he already spent some of his mana, but there's just no tools in hand for him to deal with that, since most of his sweepers come on turn 6. And we are continuing that same sort of path here in Lumi's right lane as well. I think that looks really good. I think that that's the correct thing to do as well. You don't need to have multiple emissaries of the quorum active in order to secure a one-turn win, if you get an opportunity to do that. And now this is like just look at the board right here. I mean, obviously Melo's hand is sick, but you are really teasing him apart because he has problems in all 3 lanes. Now, the problems in the middle lane are not that serious, since the conflagration is going to do an incredible amount of work to clean that up. And this is a card that is really important in the matchup, because if you can play out cards like that and the Ignite, it can keep these Hounds of War from attacking a second time. So they're really just a one-turn burst or a one-turn fog effect, where you're stopping your opponent's stuff from attacking. But we have a chance here to eclipse the opponent out from Melo's side. There aren't a lot of charges on the Eclipse, to be honest. Here, it also should be noted that this is part of the reason that you also want the Lunas in the left lane, so that if you are using an Eclipse, that it has an extra charge. Here, it's an important placement element for her, and it's always good to remember that for there's various heroes that do better or worse in some of the various lanes. She is one that does better in the left lane. Kind of unfortunate on the pulses there, not being able to hit things very well. Both of the heroes survived it, but we do have an opportunity to play a second one. But this is a pretty big investment into shutting down this lane for the side of Melo. And I almost I'm not crazy about this usage, honestly, because the opponent's hand isn't great in terms of just raw card count. And so this might be one of the choices that I feel like that turn could have been managed differently here. And now also we have a decision to move the Kana out of that lane. I think probably trying to set up a sweeper in that left lane. That's what it looks like here. But I'm almost wondering about this Crystal Man. I guess it wasn't deployed this turn. It's been here for a little while now. So no mistake there. But she is going to just die. It should be noted also that I didn't think I mentioned the win condition here for the mono blue deck. This is a deck that really relies very heavily on the... Okay, so we get our first annihilation of the game. We're going to get a few of these over the course of this game. But yeah, so we had the Lumi that was playing out a bunch of stuff into that lane to try to build up a bit of an advantage and actually push some tower damage. Then, so we had a blue hero that was able to deploy into the right lane on the side of Melo and was able to then annihilate that board. But we're going to see another annihilation right here on the left-hand lane. As you can imagine, 3 heroes in lane. Like, I mean, this is a pretty good annihilation. And then we'll actually even have, like, this really cool moment here, if you pay attention, where across all 3 lanes so right now, at the beginning of this turn, so right now, there is no unit on any of the 3 boards. The entire board is clear. This is the first time I've actually ever seen that myself before. I mean, obviously at the beginning of the game. But yeah, everything has died over the course of those last couple of turns as a result of all those annihilations. There'll be more annihilations coming. Don't you worry. If you like annihilation, this is the match for you. But yeah, particularly, I just want to point out this like combo of on Lumi's side is having the blue and the green hero together. Like, this is part of the reason why he pairs them, and it doesn't play anything in the mid lane. I mean, also there's the conflagration in the mid lane too, but having them paired together is what's necessary in order to really go off. And that's, so when in doubt, they tend to pair them together for that reason. We do have multiple copies of Aghanim's Sanctum. Oh, there's at least the one that's active right now on the side of Melo. Don't think that we see any more out at the moment. But yeah, this mono blue deck tries to get in some chip damage, takes 1 tower usually with a combination of the Arcane Assault and Dimensional Portals and things of that nature, and then we'll often have to take the second tower with a Bolt of Damocles, which is, I mean, like, it's an exotic win condition, I know. There's kind of a bit of a style points element to it as well, which is pretty sweet, but it's just not, this is part of the problem of a mono blue deck. Like, you get lots of card draw, you get lots of sweepers, but in terms of win conditions, you don't get a whole ton, which is part of the reason, I think, why you see the blue-green deck being a lot more popular. It's just, it does a lot of the same things, like it plays most of the same good cards. In addition, you're going to have access to Drow Ranger, which is kind of dumb, and but you also get a clean win condition where you can take advantage of the game, you can lock things up, and then just go off and actually end it, as opposed to sort of relying and waiting around that your win condition will kind of like arrive. So we have the players kind of trying to decide what they're going to do in this lane. A little bit of posturing here on the side of Lumi as well, trying to induce his opponent to do something, because there was clearly a suggestion that you're going to see a double Thunder God's Wrath come out at this point, because he had the first one that came out, but you know, now there's an opportunity for a second one as well. So he can do that right now if he wanted to. I also like this sequencing here for Melo, where he saw the opponent play out the Blink Dagger that strongly suggests that there's going to be a blink with the Blink Dagger as well. So you let your opponent do that, you see where that Zeus is going to land, and then you make your decisions about what you're going to do with your own Blink Dagger, and you don't even give them the information that the Blink Dagger is going to be actually used before you do that. So he moves into the mid lane with his Zeus, which might seem a bit odd here, since he already has a hero in this lane. And then also, once again, you're seeing the same sort of play from Lumi, waiting for his opponent to do something, and then he plays the Roseleaf Druid. Not that that's a high value, high impact play, but I just think that it was interesting. We do see here this just like an interesting sequence of where different things were allocated. I actually almost dislike the sequencing here, if you wanted to maximize damage, I feel like it would be better to, I guess killing that creep through that sort of cutesy play is nice, but I was just feeling like if you had played the Dimensional Portal out before the Crystal Maiden left the lane, then you could have, you wouldn't have to do this bit of repositioning nonsense. Not that it's a big deal, but we do get the conflagration out on the left lane, which will hopefully try to slow things down there, which it is the place where there's going to, I think, clearly be some action, as this middle lane, Lumi does not want to come back here. There's a bunch of these, like, there's the conflagration, etc. Ending here, though, finally on that Arcane Assault is a really nice touch, because it does allow Melo to start this turn with the Annihilation. So really solid play here of what's happening, and this is kind of like what I'm saying, where right now Melo has to soften up that mid tower, has to find a kill on one of these towers through relatively honest techniques, and then we'll try to set up a actual kill, an actual win with these bolts of Damocles here. And so that makes it really important to play for this mid lane, even though it's kind of not where he would rather have his Zeus committed. I guess having things spread out is really nice. This deployment here is, I think, a little bit, if you had all three blue heroes going left, is pretty risky. I think that there's a very good chance that Lumi has a sweeper that can really ruin your day. It should also be noted that not having access to the Aghanim Sanctum is a big deal here. I also want to note that putting the Hourglass into the right lane is actually a big advantage. This is always something that there's like different cards that take a different advantage of being, left, right, center, or wherever. In this case, it is better to have a Hourglass in the right lane, because it's a card that, like, obviously its effect works in all the lanes, no matter what's going on in the game. And so by placing it over there, it makes it harder for your opponent to kill it before, like, while they're going off, for example. So one of the things that you can see in the blue-green deck is, like, the Hourglass is a real problem to deal with when you're going off. Okay, so we get the Annihilation here on the side of Lumi, as you can probably would have expected. I mean, it probably wasn't even necessary there. He wants to keep his tower above 20, though. That's a big breakpoint difference. And so he definitely has played strategically around that to maximize the chances of keeping the tower above it. Like, there probably were other plays that he could have entertained, but pulling the trigger on the Annihilation there makes sense, also because you have a better deployment next turn than your opponent does. This is something that really seems to matter to me in blue mirrors. Your shit dies a lot. And, like, both players, too, because you're killing your own stuff, you're killing your opponent's stuff, like Annihilations, Sweepers, energy costs, back and forth and back and forth. So timing making your decisions based on who has the better deployment next turn actually seems to be kind of important. So in this case, the Lumi had the better deployment, but his opponent had the initiative, so we got the Annihilation in that left lane. So now we're going to move into the center lane. This is one where I think that Melo is a little bit spooked with the opponent having the potential of having one more Annihilation. Definitely has to set up a kill on this tower this turn to actually have a chance to win this game. This is very much one of the challenges of a deck like this. Does have to draw some cards, though, to find a way to counter that Ogre Magi. The opponent doesn't find anything in order to stop to wipe this lane, allowing Melo to play out the Eclipse, kill the Ogre Magi, and actually do something constructive here. I'm interested actually of whether or not it was even necessary to do that, but I guess there wasn't a lot else that you could do with it exactly. I'm not sure. But we are into a position right now where this lane, we do have a kill on it on the side of Melo, but he does have to find a second tower to take down in order to actually finish this game. But yeah, at this point, we've seen some really big swings, though, as to what's been happening over the course of the game. We've had a lot of annihilations, and it really is almost feels like sometimes that the annihilations are not, like, big, massive annihilations. They're kind of just small value annihilations. And this is, I think, what you see particularly in these decks that don't have a lot of tools to, like, point and click and kill something. The best that you see that actually works that way in this matchup is actually Melo's copies of Eclipse, which is part of the reason why his usage of Eclipse at the beginning of the game was a bit unusual to me, and I feel like could have been different, because having access to a card like that is one of the best ways to have like an asymmetric sweeper. Like, for instance, in that lane, you would have been able to just use the Eclipse like earlier on the turn if you had it in your hand initially and didn't draw into it. Get some damage in. But yeah, now the question becomes, like, where exactly does Melo win the game? This is something that I ask myself a lot as I've been playing more and thinking more about the game. Is now we do have a disaster here, though, because as long as Lumi has a Gust in hand, he can shut things down in this left lane. But yeah, this is part of the issue of what's going on here, is that he can't, that Melo is going to have a really hard time pushing down an Ancient, especially against another deck that has so many sweepers. And as a result, you are kind of forced into split pushing to varying degrees, and getting that damage in on a lane that you've already kind of been losing is really hard. I mean, well, you haven't really been losing it exactly. It's been a fairly even lane, especially because it's been annihilated at this point 3 times this game. Like, holy moly. We do get the Bolt of Damocles out. Respond with the Gust. And right now we can just kind of go off a little bit on the side of Lumi. He doesn't have, like, all the tools to go as hard as he would like, but it's definitely enough to get the job done. But I think that you can kind of see from this game of, like, some of the various points that the players were playing for and focused on. One interesting point specifically to note is I think that the role Hourglass plays in a matchup like this, it's really important. I don't think that this is the matchup that is, like, the decks that take necessarily the best usage of it, because it's often hard to get that 10 gold to begin with until you get to the Annihilation turn. But in this case, it was really good on the side of Melo for a little while, but eventually you kind of powered through it. This was also, it should be noted, a deck on Melo's side that people said is designed to prey on the combo deck, and I'm honestly not really seeing it. This isn't a deck that, it didn't impress me in how it functioned, all things considered. It was a little bit clunky in some of its execution of some of the game, like it just not having that directed point removal. Just felt like you were so locked into annihilating yourself again and again and again. Like a lot of these annihilations that you saw, yeah, I kind of wanted to emphasize, like, all of them that were happening, because, like, there's some of them that just weren't, they didn't look great, and but you need to do it anyway, because if you let your opponent do anything, they could, Gust, Stars Align, Incarnation of Salamania, and then you're dead. So you have to play this way of kind of contorting your play around what your opponent could have, because and especially with the nature of Artifact, where players just draw a good deal of cards, they see a good percentage of their deck. Like, it's not hard to imagine that by that point in the game, that Lumi has the goods to really go off. Now, sometimes he did, and sometimes he didn't actually have it, but in this particular kind of deck, it almost always feels like they have it a lot of the time. So in some ways, it's interesting that Artifact feels like a more like your hand is face up a long time, because you really often have what they think that you have, compared to other games where the instances of them actually having it are so much lower. So that was something that I found really interesting in this matchup and in this game. But yeah, Lumi takes it. Congratulations to him. He moved on to the winners bracket or something. I mean, the exact structure of this tournament is a little bit confusing, so I'm not exactly sure what all that means. But all I do know for sure is that it was a sweet game. I really enjoyed it. I don't really have anything else to add on it other than saying that Annihilation isn't a great spot removal spell. I is kind of all I would have to say, and that you really want to, maybe, yeah, I think that the Eclipse usage early in the game honestly was a bigger mistake than I thought it was initially, and that might have been one of the points where Melo, had he managed that turn specifically differently, then he could have approached the entire game differently, since he would have the opportunity to do a one-sided board wipe in different situations that he didn't have that opportunity to there, because he used it up. But anyway, that's all fine. It was a hard game for sure. Very, very hard game. Brutal series, but it was lovely to watch. Be sure to check out the VODs, check out the games as they're happening on Twitch in the near future. There'll be a couple more days of coverage, and then check out other things that are happening on the channel. Thank you very much for coming here. To subscribe, like, comment, share, give me feedback. I always love feedback, and I always love catching, what were some of the plays that I missed that you guys saw. All that kind of stuff I absolutely love. It helps me a ton also when you share the content. I'm trying to grow the channel still, and you guys helping with that makes a massive difference. But this was a blast. Enjoy the rest of the WePlay tournament content, and I'll talk to you guys later.